The last time I jumped into a hockey video game bearing the name of hockey legend Wayne Gretzky, it was on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and to put it mildly, the game was pretty bad. And that's as far as I'll go here, and my hopes are only marginally higher as I venture into Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey for the Nintendo 64, courtesy of Midway, and basically an adaptation of an arcade game of the same name, so it has to be good, right? After all, this thing got a sequel, and a reskin modeled after the Olympics, so it has to exude some level of greatness, right? Well, I don't know about that bit, but I do know that this is a pretty fun game to play, as both the NHL teams and the NHLPA players of the time possesses pretty slick control whether you're using the analog stick or the directional pad, gives you the options of playing quick arcade style games or the traditional style of hockey with full-on teams and rules, and there's pretty slick commentary from some guy whose name I don't know. And while the purist will be turned off by the lack of hockey realism and the influence of games such as NBA Jam or NFL Blitz or games of that ilk, for someone who just wants a quick-paced game of hockey without the extra baggage, this is a pretty decent offering. Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey offers only a couple modes of play, aside from a quick exhibition match where you could play against a randomly selected opponent. Well, kind of. There's also a season mode where you could play a somewhat typical NHL season of sorts, or you could just go for the playoffs or that sort of thing. And you could save your progress as well as your career stats to keep track of all your scores and goals and stuff. It's a fairly bare bones package in terms of the feature set, but there are also cheat codes that can enable some hidden bits like team edits, trades, and even newly playable super teams. Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey also offers two styles of gameplay, arcade and sim mode. Arcade mode is the default 3-on-3, looser, faster-paced game that was featured in the arcades, while sim mode is essentially full 5-on-5 ice hockey with some of the rules and penalties in effect, or all of them depending on the options you've set. However, those expecting a more pure, realistic hockey game should either temper their expectations or just go back to the EA-produced NHL games. Sim mode may play like the usual brand of hockey, but it's still an arcade game at heart, and the emphasis here is very much on fast-paced, hard-hitting hockey action rather than any attempt at a true simulation of the sport. Sim mode might enforce a few rules here and there, but it won't disable the fireball puck shots or the brick wall goalies. You can, however, tweak the size of the rink, and that's gotta be worth something, I suppose. Okay, here's the deal. As a single-player game, Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey holds little value. Yes, there is a season mode if you want a longer experience, but if you just want a quick game, then be prepared for any random team the game throws at you, and call it a day unless you know the cheat codes, and the cheat codes are fun for a lark, but not much more than that. The overall challenge is not too bad. There's multiple difficulty settings you could toggle to make the game as easy or as difficult as you'd like, but really, this is one of those games that's best played at parties with a bunch of buddies to make the experience much more fulfilling. It's not intended to be a deep, realistic simulation of the sport of ice hockey, it's just a part of a fun little arcade game that emphasizes speed and high-scoring hijinks over any semblance of realism. Control's pretty responsive for the most part and works well enough for the game to be functional, though I would suggest heading into the options to check over button configuration in order to get a grasp of which buttons do what. Maybe even tweak the setup more to your liking. You can move the player with either the D-pad or the analog stick, though the game doesn't seem to take the analog stick into consideration, so you could go either way and it wouldn't make much of a difference control-wise. Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey is not the prettiest looking hockey day of its day, and, well, saying it's aged poorly is being generous, shall we say. Regardless, the graphics are par for the course on N64, and while the players aren't the most brilliant looking pieces of work, what with their plain Jane jerseys and somewhat blurry faces, at the very least you have a decent looking hockey rink with various camera angles to play with, the presentation's pretty solid, the menus are adequate, and there isn't much in terms of graphical clipping or any sort of visual oddities that might pop out of nowhere. And if the streaking puck seems a bit distracting for your tastes, you could always turn it off in the options, if you want. The sound quality is pretty decent. Some generic tunes greet you in the menus while you have some decent sound effects to complement the action on screen. There's quite a bit of solid sounding commentary on display here, which is nice considering this is a cartridge game, but mind you, after several games it starts to get a bit repetitive. a common ailment with a lot of these older titles with plenty of voiceover commentary, but the effort is nonetheless appreciated and adds a bit of a dynamic to the games. Overall, Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey is a fun little arcade hockey game that's quick-paced, easy to get into, has a limited degree of customization, and just something that can be played in short bursts, and you'll more than sate your fix. As a single-player affair, it's a fairly shallow experience that's fun for short bursts, but if you could drag a couple buddies along, this is plenty of fun. All in all, a good little hockey title on N64 that eventually got sequels, or rehashes, or whatever what floats your boat. It's got follow-ups, that's all I could say, so sure, why not?